The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. This is Bob Jurkowski with On Demand Advisors. It's a pleasure to have you join us for today's webinar. Today's topic is 7 best practices in the sales area that every B2B company can benefit from and needs in 2022. If we had enough time today, we could actually cover 25 best practices that you could implement today. But today, because of time constraints, we're going to focus in on the top 7. And I'd suggest to you, if you're really interested in this topic, which I hope you have extraordinary interest in looking at this, let's schedule a follow-up chat after today's webinar and talk about the other best practices that are important in each area that we're going to discuss. So we're going to focus on 7 areas, 7 best practices today, and really help accelerate and jumpstart your 2022 so that you have phenomenal success in the area of sales. As with all these webinars that we present and conduct every month with executives like yourself, feel free to post questions that you have. I encourage you to participate in our polls that we have throughout the webinar. And this is really about giving you the type of information, the best practices, the revenue growth acceleration that you're going to need for this year to really have a phenomenal year in 2022. So anyway, let's get started. And again, thank you for joining us. Just a bit of a background on our company, On Demand Advisors. Craig and I started this revenue acceleration agency 13 years ago. And before that, of course, we were running many successful companies in Silicon Valley. So I've been a serial CEO for both public and private technology companies in Silicon Valley. And at different stages, I've helped build 10 different B2B companies. What I found as we talk about today's topic around sales best practices is I have scaled and built some extraordinary enterprise sales organizations. First as a VP of sales, then as a chief revenue officer, then as a COO, chief operating officer, and then finally as CEO. And what I found is that there needs to be a way to distill best practices and provide that to each of us. And there needs to be a path forward so it's capital efficient, so it really leverages the performance and skills that we have, and it maximizes the potential that you have for your organization. Craig, my co-founder, Craig Remy, is a serial CMO for Silicon Valley companies. And that's where Craig and I met. We worked together at a company called Intact and then a public company. And Intact is just one of the companies we're going to talk about today, a phenomenal software as a service, cloud-based company, providing financial applications that we scaled, added thousands and thousands of customers, and 300 sell through partners. And the company was ultimately acquired by the Sage Group for $850 million. But Craig also has extraordinary background in terms of branding, in terms of leading marketing initiatives, and really focusing on how to engage 100% of the target market. We work with many brands, many different logos, different companies represented here today. And the reason why I bring this up is the serial experience that we have working with hundreds of B2B companies. So when we have a webinar like today, we're distilling these best practices from all this work that we've done with these companies into something that you can really easily digest and benefit from today. So whether you're a startup company and looking for laying track and doing it the right way, whether you're a mid-stage company and you're looking at scaling and growing in the most efficient way possible and getting the sales performance out of the teams, or whether you're a large public company and you've got sales people and sales distribution executives all over the planet and partners, this webinar is for you. Okay, so let's start off with a poll if we could, and let's talk about what's important from your perspective. So when we think about 2022, help me understand from your perspective, what do you think is the biggest sales challenge that you have today? Is it improving the performance of your sales team? Is it accelerating your sales cycle? Is it getting new sales executives up to speed quickly, getting them productive? Is it creating the quantity of sales leads that you need each and every month? Or is it choosing better partners as you think about how you go to market in terms of your strategy? So go ahead if you could. We really appreciate you participating in today's poll because we'll share the results as we go through the session together and make sure that we're tailoring our discussion today based upon what's important to you. So again, we'll keep the poll open here for a little bit longer. Please go ahead and weigh in. Everybody has an important interactive way to participate in today's webinar. So thank you very much. And I found all these are challenges that we all face. It's just a question of degree. Okay, so thank you everybody for participating. And let me go ahead and I'll wait for another second or two. Get your last poll choice in, and then I'm going to close and share this with everybody today. Okay, so here's what you shared with us. 11% of you stated that your biggest challenge is improving the performance of your existing sales team. 28% stated that accelerating the sales cycle is your most important challenge. 6% stated it's bringing up new sales executives, getting them onboarded, getting them up to speed. And not unusual, 50% of you stated it's creating the quantity of sales leads that you need each and every month, each and every quarter. And then 6% stated it's choosing better partners. So thank you everybody for participating. That's really fantastic. And what I would say, it's not surprising. Typically, the number one selection all the time in our 13 plus years that we've been operating the business is a lack of the number of sales leads that the sales organization needs to go make their numbers. Okay. So we always start with the revenue acceleration system because what we look at as we talk about areas 5 and 6 today, that's in yellow. This is around sales optimization and sales acceleration. That's really the topic for the day. But as you know, revenue creation is a connected process. It starts with strategy, which is typically in purple on here. It goes into marketing in terms of your marketing efforts that you have, and really putting in place something that we're going to talk about, which is a revenue acceleration engine. It's in sales, and then it's also in the partners in your ecosystem that you have. So all these are really important aspects of having a system. And we talk about a system because this is all connected. So here are the sales best practices we're going to cover today. And I picked one best practice in each of these areas. So the first one we're going to talk about is how to create the quality of sales leads that you need. The quality is really important because it's not about fogging a mirror. It's about having somebody in your target audience who is opting in and expressing interest in your company, your services, your solutions. It's that type of engagement that you need today, as opposed to cold calling outbound to a target list. The second area that we're going to talk about is the quantity. And of course, that goes back to our poll that we did earlier. Everybody that I've talked to in all my years of experience over many years of building companies, it's about getting enough sales leads and sales opportunities for your sales team. The third area we're going to talk about is driving executive performance for your sales executives. How do you drive that performance? How do you do that in a demonstrable way to get everybody consistently performing the way you want them? The fourth area is accelerating your sales cycle. And we're going to share with you a truly breakthrough revolutionary way that you can accelerate your sales cycle by at least 33%. The next is this accelerating the close. We're going to talk about some ways that you can accelerate the close. And then as you scale and grow, it's about onboarding new sales executives. So we've had a lot of work in this area about what's the best way to get sales executives up to speed quickly. And then finally, how do you choose better partners? So we'll cover each of those in detail today in today's webinar. Where we always start, as you would expect, starting the new year, 2022, is what's your net new revenue goal that you have for the year? What do you want to close this year? And I'm just sharing with you the 3 funnels that we typically talk about here at On Demand Advisors. So the first funnel is all about marketing. How do you create the interest, the engagement with your target audience? The second funnel is about not lead qualification, but lead development, which is how do you take somebody that's interested in your company in your solutions, and how do you convert them into a sales opportunity. And the last funnel, of course, is your sales funnel, your CRM funnel, which is how do you take somebody who's a sales opportunity to close. So this is a wonderful process. And as you can tell with each of these funnels, there's a conversion that happens. So if you had to go and your goal was to get, let's say, another $4 million of net new revenue this year in 2022, and your ACV, annual contract value, is $100,000, then we need 40 new transactions to close this year for you to hit that number. Now, most everybody that I talk to knows exactly what their conversion rate is of a sales opportunity to close. So in this case, we're expecting that we're going to have 1 out of 4, so 25%. So up here, we've got 160 sales qualified leads, and that we're going to create, and then 40 of those close in terms of sales opportunities being closed in 2 transactions. So everybody knows this funnel really well. What most companies are missing is these 2 funnels. So you've got to basically put in what we're going to talk about, your revenue acceleration engine, to create these funnels. If you do that, it's going to change your world. You'll have predictability, you'll be intentional, you'll understand what's happening, and you won't be flat-footed when the board asks you what does next quarter look like, because you'll know exactly not only how you did this quarter, but you'll know how you're going to do next quarter. So this is really about saying, how do we put in the marketing programs, the campaigns, the demand generation that's going to give us a yield of 133 market qualified leads per month? How does our organization take those 133 market qualified leads every month and do what we call lead development and convert them into 13 sales opportunities that you're going to work on for the month? And then how does your sales team take those 13 opportunities and close on average 3.4 per month at $100,000 ACV so that you can actually know you're on the right track each and every month? So this is really the key, because what you're really looking for is a model that's going to give you predictability. And we call this revenue engineering. So let's talk about the first sales best practice that you can put in place. How do you create the quality of leads? And I'm talking about the quality, and we'll get to the quantity. The quality of leads that you require. Well, the key that we find is that there are a lot of ways to think about this. And what I'm going to do is talk about what I think is the most important way. And that is, find out what's important to your target audience. Find out what's important to your decision makers. Why don't you go out and ask them what's important to them? So I'll bet everybody that's here today, you've got a list of pains and business challenges that you solve. You also have on the other side of that same coin your value propositions. So these could be strategic, they could be tactical, and you got these value propositions that you offer to your target audience. Wouldn't it be great for having that target audience, let's say 50 or 100 decision makers, actually answer these questions for you and give you the input so that statistically you understood what was important to the target audience? And finally, if you're going to have some offers, if you were going to use some lead channels as we talk about them, which ones would you select based upon the appropriate ones, prioritized ones for your target audience? So let's talk about how we actually help companies really get the quality that they're looking for. We do that through buyer intelligence. And what I realized a number of years ago is that most of us make marketing too difficult. What I mean by that is we don't stop and ask the audience what's important to them. We don't do that in a rigorous way. We may talk to companies that just purchased from us. We may talk to our customers who have already made that investment, but we don't go out there and talk to the audience in our target audience. And let's say your target audience is engineers in the oil and gas industry. Wouldn't it be great if you could engage 50 or 100 engineering directors and VPs and really get their input about what's important? And that's what we do. We typically will execute a buyer intelligence survey that we continue to work with. We've done hundreds of these with management teams. And what we're always looking at is validating assumptions. So what are the pains that you solve? How important are those pains to your target audience? What are the decision drivers that would be important to your target audience as far as making a decision sooner than later? The value propositions. How important are those value propositions that you have today? If they're not ready to undergo an evaluation or buy today, what would be important in terms of the ongoing engagement that you have for them? And so you could see what's the buying process? How would they like to buy this type of solution or evaluate it? Influencers. Who do they trust? Where would they go? How do they want to be reached? Where do they look for information in terms of this type of solution? So when you do this, you basically get the truth, as I call it. So when we execute these type of buyer intelligence surveys with different stakeholders, let's say 50 VP of engineering in the oil and gas industry, we're going to ask, let's say, 25 to 30 questions. From that survey, then, we're going to distill the results of that information back into what we call the core messaging document, which gives you your messaging strategy, your elevator pitch, horizontal and vertical propositions, and then the rating of the top value propositions. That then gives you the foundation to say, we now know what's important to our target audience, so let's go engage with them in an engagement roadmap and create the ebooks, the videos, the infographics, the webinars, the success stories, and the playbook that we're going to need to be successful. Now, when we talk about the sales tools, which is number 3 here, that could be a buyer's guide, for instance. And we've created many of these buyer's guides because sometimes your target audience, your VP, your director, your CEO, whoever is that person that you're working with, that's your champion, sometimes they don't know how to buy your type of service or solution. So a buyer's guide could be a great way to give them the information that they need to equip themselves for this journey. Another one would be an ROI guide. How do they cost justify this? The larger the company, the more likely that you're going to have to cost justify this type of purchase relative to alternative purchases or investments that they can make. Another example would be a recorded demonstration or video, such as an explainer video or a recorded demonstration of the solution or the solution in action. And even another example would be industry or customer success stories that basically prove the value in practice that your solution delivers. So that would be the first one, which is the quality of your leads. The second is the quantity of your leads. So when you put in what we're going to talk about, a revenue acceleration engine, you do it based upon these type of goals. One is you want your revenue to be very intentional. In other words, you know the type of customers that you want. 2 is you want it to have it be predictable so that you have predictability over the next several quarters. The third is consistent and scalable. So when you put this engine in place, you know that you're going to have consistent results each and every month, each and every quarter. Capital efficient is really important. And by knowing a lot about your buyer, you can make the right investments instead of guessing and experimenting. It needs to be integrative across sales, marketing, and business development functions that you have at your company. And it needs to give you the right CAC or the right cost of acquisition. So we talk about putting in a revenue acceleration engine. We already talked about the first 2, which is number 1 is you have to create the revenue acceleration engine model, and you gain deep insight through buyer intelligence. But like any good engine, there are components. So one of the components is your database. We're a big believer that 5 to 10% of your target audience are ready to evaluate and buy from you today. The challenge is we don't know which 5 or 10%. So a good way to do that is actually have a reach strategy that gets you to 100% of your target audience. You also need to have a source of truth, which is your marketing automation system and best practices. And we've been putting these type of systems in for many years, and we've created our own best practices to make sure that the system aligns with your organization as opposed to you aligning with the system. The 5th area is the right offers and the sales tools to engage your buyer through each step of the sales process. The 6th is the right channels. There are lots of ways we can talk about implementing different channels to reach your target audience, but you want to use the right ones that are appropriate. Next is executing these campaigns on a weekly basis. And so when Craig and the team works with our clients, they're typically putting together a 90-day campaign plan or roadmap that they're executing every week, and then measuring conversions and looking for the ROI. We're a partner with ZoomInfo. Now, there are a lot of different ways you can go find your database or build your database, but the key is that you have a way to do it. I've always been amazed at how many executives that I talk to are only reaching a small fraction of their target audience. So this is one way to do that. And we work with our clients to actually create a reach strategy to get there. Another thing is in choosing the right channels. So everybody's going to use targeted email programs or campaigns to reach their target audience. But there are a lot of other ways to do that too, through content syndication, for instance. Or you may be using some type of SEO or PPC program, such as LinkedIn, for instance. Social media is an important avenue for every company that we work with. Event maximization, whether it be virtual events or whether it be physical events today, as we're moving out of a COVID era, it's important to really maximize your investment in those type of vehicles. So this is just a small list of campaigns and channels that you can use to reach your target audience. But the whole goal is you put this engine in place is to get that predictable lead volume that you're getting each and every week, each and every month. And it's incredible once you start putting this in and once you start seeing the results, it starts giving you this certainty that you're looking for as far as running the business. So that's the second area as far as the best practice. The first was quality. The second was quantity. The third area I'd like to touch on is driving sales executive performance. And by the way, each of these areas we're talking about, I typically have 5 different best practices that we help our clients implement. But today I'm just going to cover one of each of these. So how do you drive sales executive performance? Well, one of the keys that we find with that's always identified by Gartner or Forrester or G2 or some of these other companies that do research is that most of your sales executives are spending a lot of time on non-sales activities. So that really robs them of the ability to be productive and have effective face time in terms of selling. So one of the things that we created a couple years ago is what we call the Sales Performance Center. Now, the Sales Performance Center is everything that your sales team needs at one place. So no longer do they have to try to go to some type of server or SharePoint or some PDF server that's out there or some location they have or Big Bar on Steel, what they're going to put together. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. So we created this Sales Performance Center so that it could be organized around solutions, personas, steps in the sales cycle that you have. And I'll just go to an example that's live here and give you an example of what we're talking about. This is Technical Toolboxes. This is one of our clients. This is their Sales Performance Center. This is their lead qualification steps that they go through, and this is their sales process that they go through. Now, every one of the sales tools that they have available to them is currently available here. And what all their salespeople have to do is say, gee, I'm looking for what are the things that I need for sales training, or what are the things I need in terms of my sales cycle. I may look for a specific solution. So for instance, we just helped them launch Encroachment Manager. So on Encroachment Manager, they have an ROI guide, they have an overview, they have a pipeline integrity applications webinar, and they also have another guide here for encroachments and crossings, and a myriad of different things available to them. But everything is available in one location here. So it just makes them phenomenally successful in terms of that. They also can pull up by sales stage, what do they need to have as far as a sales tool at each stage. And they can also pull up different solutions by persona or target audience. And so this Sales Performance Center really gives them everything that they need to actually help navigate. So that's why when we talk about working with your champion, giving them the tools, giving your sales team the tools is really kind of very important. Now, this is one view that we talk about, which is the view of basically looking at the sales performance center in this way. We also give you other ways to look at this too. So not only can you look at it from this view, but you could say, we've got a lot of different solutions, and we were wondering, um, how many of these things do we have, sales tools, to take us through the sales process for each of these applications? So for Pipeline Toolbox, they have an overview of Pipeline Toolbox. They have a buyer's guide, they have an ROI guide, they have a success story, they have a recorded webinar, and they have a ebook companion with that recorded webinar. So what they have is they have this rich selection of sales tools that they can use to help navigate the sales and buying process with their target audience. Okay, so that's an example of the Sales Performance Center. Let's talk about number 4. Number 4 is, how do you accelerate your sales cycle? Everybody I talk to is going to tell me that their sales cycle takes too long, and that's true. So there's got to be a way to accelerate your sales cycle. We created something called the Sales Driven Website. The Sales Driven Website is just a phenomenal breakthrough for us and for our clients, because most websites out there do a good job of informing, but they don't do a good job of guiding the buyer through the buying process. So if you look at the corporate executive board, they said that 57% of your sales cycle is completed by the time your prospect engages with the sales executive. That's very true today. So your website should educate. It should guide the buyer through the buying process. It should set the preference for your solutions. And in some cases, it should complete the sale online. And that's very important. So again, since we talked about Technical Toolbox, let's go ahead and show you an example of the sales-driven website that we've created for them. And you'll understand what I'm talking about. This is the homepage for Technical Toolboxes. Again, you can see this, it's an exciting website, it's interactive, it's visual, it's engaging. And compare this with your website and say, how do we transform or migrate ourselves down this path? So from a solution perspective, I can come in here and I can look at roles, or I can come in here and look at solutions, but it's going to take me down the right path. Now, let's say I'm a corrosion engineer in the oil and gas industry. What I'm really interested in, what can you do for me? So what we've created is a buyer's journey. Now what we're doing is we're accelerating their sales process. So right online here, as a corrosion engineer, I can see what are the challenges you're going to help me address. What are the solutions you provide? What are the frequently asked questions that everybody's going to ask? Who are some clients that you have today? So they have the who's who in the oil and gas industry. They're clients of theirs today. And then just kind of moving forward down this path, what are some next steps? So what we're doing here is we're automating the process of your best salesperson engaged with your buyer to actually help them through this process. So they can request a demonstration, they can see a corrosion engineer success story and get that right away and talk about what's important to them. They can actually get a buyer's guide. If I don't really know how to go about looking at a solution that's developed for corrosion engineers, how do I look at a solution buyer's guide? And then finally, I can see a recorded demonstration. Why should we be tying up our pre-sales resources or pre-sales engineers in doing educational demonstrations when we can have all that done online? So this is a great way for you to think about accelerating that. And I'll bet you're thinking about this right now as you're looking at today's webinar and saying, gee, wouldn't that be a great next step for us to take in terms of migrating down this path? Okay. So when we think about a sales-driven website, we're thinking about the most important real estate that you have today, which is where everybody goes when they hear about your company. And you can see these different steps that are taking place in terms of the website. But it's all about online, offline, matching each other in terms of the sales process and the buying experience. And so number 7 here is really providing a consistent experience to your buyer. And number 8 is optional. For some of you, you may be selling a solution that is way too expensive to sell online. Let's say it's $500,000. And that's truly where you want to do all the front end process of education and preference setting. However, you may be having some additional services, add-on capabilities. You may do some training. And those are the type of solutions where you may say, we want to complete that sale process online, as we do with technical toolboxes. Okay, so that's the 4th area. Let's talk about the 5th area. How do you accelerate the close? So there are a lot of ways to accelerate the close, and I'm going to talk about one in particular. So some of you may use DocuSign, and DocuSign is actually an excellent tool, or HelloSign, and there are a lot of different substitutes out there. But essentially, one of the things that we came up with is what we call the accelerated contracting process. And everybody that you work with, especially the large companies, you provide them with your contract, you provide them with your license, your subscription license or your software license, your services agreement, privacy agreement, maybe you have a SLA, service level agreement too. All of these are typically routed to legal. And many companies that we work with find that they can lose 1 to 3 months in that process of negotiations. So we said there's got to be a better way. So we came up with something called accelerated contracting. That's where one of our lawyers looks at all of your agreements that you have today, figures out how to streamline those agreements. And then what we do is we post those agreements to your website, and we move to an order form. And so the idea is to have your legal documents on your website. And you can make those gated or ungated, and to make sure that it's in one location. Now, once we've helped our clients move through this process, we've found that they've been able to reduce the negotiations by up to 90%. Because when you offer this type of process, people are focused on making sure that the order is right. They're not looking at how do we spend 100 hours looking at your T's and C's. So this is a great way for you to maximize this step in the sales process and make sure you're putting in best practices. There's another thing, though, that is important when you post your T's and C's on the website as opposed to using them through DocuSign or something like that. And that is every company wants to update and change their T's and C's, terms and conditions, on a regular basis. And so when you do that, you can change that one place on your website, and that's effective everywhere. There's nothing more difficult in sales than going back to an enterprise customer and asking them to replace their current agreement with the new agreement because they don't see the value in doing that. Let's talk about number 6. Number 6 is really important. As you grow, as you scale, as you have success, you want to onboard new sales executives. And this becomes a very important process. So when we look at this, how do you do that? Well, one of the things that we do in many cases is implement and create a sales playbook. So the playbook is how do you get your team competent and live and successful in a matter of days as opposed to weeks or months. The other thing that you're typically looking for is consistency. So most people always lament and talk about the ABCs. They've got A players, they've got B players, and C players. The key here is how do you get everybody up to that A level? And how do you ensure to do that so that it's consistent? So you've got to have a onboarding system that gets everybody to that point. Otherwise, you'll always end up with the A, Bs, and Cs and inconsistency across the team. One of our customers is a company called ICUC. ICUC is a global social media management services company. They have a direct presence in 36 different countries. And as we began working with them and we built the revenue acceleration engine for them to scale, and they were having great success, they also needed to onboard new sales executives all the time. And so what we did is we built out their sales playbook. So here's an example of the chapters that we put into the sales playbook. And this is a living, breathing document that we created for them. The first thing is, since we had done the buyer intelligence for them, we absolutely understood what was important to the head of social media for these major brands that they work with. So we knew that we could educate them about what's important to the decision maker, to the stakeholders that they're working with. We also ensured that they understood all of the offerings and all of the customers by segment that they had, as well as the sales process that they went through. And then what we did is we aligned all the sales tools by the sales process so they knew how to actually engage with the target audience. We put together competitive battle cards so that they understood how to win against their competitors, how their SWOT, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, would win against those competitors. We actually created all of the different scripts that they needed, the trial closes and the variations on that. And then we also made sure that there was a wonderful handoff that happened from sales to client services. So the objective was to lay this out and have a consistent process for everybody on the team. So that's the sales playbook. That's number 6. Let's talk about number 7. Number 7 is kind of interesting, which is choosing better partners. So every company has a partner ecosystem. And when you think about this, you have some partners that are maybe sell through partners, sell with partners, influencers, even value-added resellers maybe that you've got. And the challenge, what we find with company after company, is not that they don't have a partner program, is that these partnerships don't bear fruit. And many of them never really get fully launched, and they're what we call paper partnerships. The second area that's typically difficult is they're opportunistic. That partner works with you once a year to close a deal when they see a need for your service. Or you end up working with the wrong partners. And so there's a lot of things that we could look at here. But one of the things that we'd like to share with you is focusing on this grid here and looking at stage 1 and stage 2. Remember I mentioned that I used to be the CEO at Intact, and we had 300 different partners. Well, the model that I graduated to, as you look at these different partners here, was the private label or embedded partnerships. So what we wanted to find is we wanted to find market makers and companies that actually would embed our financial suite and take that to market as their own. And we were able to do that. The reason we loved the private label embedded OEM partners is because they included us as part of their solution in every sale. So it wasn't just opportunistic, it was part of their business. And so we love that model, and we wanted to get everybody to that model. Now, we still partnered with Salesforce and providing a front-end, back-end solution, as we did as referral partners and sell with partners, but we love the embedded model the best. The second thing that we typically do is this, and this is something most people skip over. Most people create partnerships based upon incoming request. What we think you should do instead is figure out what's the ideal partner profile, create a scorecard, and then map your ecosystem and figure out how do you recruit the best partners that are going to help you sell your solutions or services into the market. Because if you don't do that, you're going to spend time with partners that don't succeed, and they're going to use a lot of your energy and a lot of your time, but you won't get the results. So those are the 7 different best practices we wanted to talk about today. Number 1 is getting the right quality and quantity of leads. The third is having a sales executive performance plan that you can put in place. The fourth is accelerating your sales cycle. And we showed you one way to do that, but I've got 5 other ways you could do that too. Accelerating the close, we showed you one of many topics we could do there. And then accelerating the onboarding. So this is about acceleration in helping you achieve success. All right, let's ask for your input here. And one more poll. Can't have enough polls, can we? So when you think about your biggest takeaway from today's webinar, and we're going to go to the Q&A here in the next session, what would that be? Is it focusing on how to accelerate your sales cycle? Is it focusing on creating more leads and opportunities for your organization? Is the biggest takeaway on focusing on improving sales executive performance? Is it focusing on selecting better partners? Or is it focusing on getting a better understanding of who your buyer is and what's important to them? So go ahead, if you could, take a few moments and participate in our poll. And I will, of course, share the results with everybody on today's webinar. But thank you very much for your participation today. It means a lot to us. And right after this, we're going to open this up for Q&A. So we appreciate your questions and look forward to those. So go ahead and participate in the poll. And I want to keep it open for a little bit longer because I don't want to close it off too soon. Okay, so thank you very much. So let me go ahead and share results with everybody here. So just go ahead and respond if you could, participate once more. It looks like we're almost into a four-way tie at this point. Okay, let me share the results. We do have a four-way tie. That's very unusual. So the first four areas seem like there's a really good cross-distribution of what's important to our target audience. So it's really about accelerating your sales cycle. It's about creating more leads and opportunities. It's about improving your sales executive performance. It's about improving your partnerships. And of course, it's about having a better understanding of your buyer. So thank you very much for that. And what I'd like to do at this point is open it up for Q&A. So go ahead, if you could, post your questions. I'll get through as many as I can today. And if in fact we can't get through all the questions, we will make sure that we have some time afterwards to discuss those questions. Okay, this question is from Mark. Mark said, where can we start? Good question, Mark. There are a lot of places to start in terms of improving your sales productivity for your sales team. I think the best place to start is with a conversation. So what I look at is, as a conversation is, let's set up a chat. I'm going to give you my my coordinates and my telephone and email address, and I'll be reaching out to you too to make sure that we could share some of these best practices with you. But let's go ahead and set up a chat so that we can understand what's important to you, maybe an area where you think you have the greatest concern. Okay, so happy to do that. Here's the next question. As a software company, we need to improve the quality of a lead. Challenges come from a big market and diverse offerings. Well, that's interesting. Good question. And let's see, who was the question from? I think that's from you, Tom. So let's talk about that because we work with many software companies, many SaaS cloud companies. Let me share with you a little bit from our perspective. When I was at the CEO at Intact, we could sell and provide our financial applications to 6 million companies out there. So it became really a challenge to figure out, as Craig and I sat down and looked at the marketplace, where do we focus on? Because we can't reach 6 million companies and we can't sell to them at the same time. So what you have to do with the big market is you have to say, okay, let's focus on understanding our market better, market intelligence. Let's focus on where our solution is a fit, and let's focus on those areas that are ripe for adoption of our solution. So we looked at going through market intelligence from a number of different vectors, and that enabled us to really focus in on specifically where we wanted to go. I also shared with you Technical Toolboxes as a client of ours. They have 15 different solutions that they offer to the oil and gas industry. So they have a very diverse set of offerings, yet we've been able to help them successfully go to market with every one of those offerings. In fact, we just helped them launch a new one just recently. So that became really good. We helped them launch something called Encroachment Manager. So that's important. So please go ahead and post your questions here. And Let me see if I can get to a couple more here before we finish our webinar. Um, Here's a question from Jennifer. Jennifer says, buyer intelligence, is that something you do or do we do that? So buyer intelligence, it's interesting, Jennifer. I encourage everybody to take a step back and do the type of interaction and buyer intelligence that we look at. A lot of times we suggest that a third party like us does that for you, because when we do the type of survey we're talking about, typically the first part of the survey is blind. If you do the survey, then with your target audience, then they're going to see who's doing the survey, and it already starts to bias the responses. So by having a third party research firm like us do the work for you, it really gives you an opportunity to get the unbiased results. And then, of course, later in the survey, we begin it blind and we go to introducing your company, so that way we can find out who's really interested in your solution and who's interested in follow-up. What's interesting about these surveys that I find most intriguing is that 30 to 50% of those that are surveyed turn into leads for the company. So those are probably the best well-qualified, market-qualified leads you'll ever have in your life. And that's because you're getting somebody in your target audience to answer 30 questions before you engage with them. So anyway, that's a great question there, Jennifer. So thank you very much for that. Okay. So thank you for that. Here's the contact information. If you'd like to set up a chat with me, send me an email. Here's my contact information, rjurkowski at ondemandadvisors.com, or call our office here. We got a number of offices, but this will get you to the appropriate extension. And just go ahead and reach out to me, and we'll set up a time to talk about your company, talk about best practices in sales, and talk about how you're going to have a phenomenal year in 2022. So on this, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. Thank you very much for joining me for today's webinar. We've got another webinar coming up in another month, and we're going to talk about how to verticalize and win your target markets. And that's going to be an exciting one too. But for today, it was really just covering at a very high level these 7 best practices that every B2B company needs in sales for success in 2022. So thank you for joining us. And on behalf of myself, Craig Remy, and our entire On-Demand Advisors team, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Wish you a fantastic day and great success in 2022.